And welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram. I'm the host here at iThemes Training, and we have with us today our friend Rebecca Gill from Web Savvy Marketing, our SEO expert. And this has been a user-requested webinar for some time, talking all about schema. And so as we're heading toward pumpkin time and Halloween and all those things, we are taking the scary out of schema today. In the pre-show, we were talking just a little bit about the new SEO training workshops that are listed for you there in the sidebar beside the chat room today. Make sure you have a look at those. And if you're just joining us and go to webinar, make sure you head over to the chat room, which is located at ithemes.com/chat. ithemes.com/chat. If you're new to iThemes Training, we do not use the questions feature in GoToWebinar. We have our own live chat room where you can get lots of, there's a conversation always going on there and good extra information, but that's the place to ask your questions. And if you would please preface your question with the word question in all uppercase, and I will save your question off to the side, and we'll ask Rebecca those questions as we wrap up. So again, the chat room, ithemes.com/chat, and let's talk about schema. Rebecca, tell us what we need to know.
All right, so as Nathan said, it's October. October is Halloween, and schema is scary. So that's why I titled this webinar, Taking the Scary Out of Schema, because I don't want people to get freaked out by schema, because you really don't have to be. It seems really overwhelming, but it's not. And, you know, Scooby-Doo, well, I have a 17-year-old daughter who's graduated from high school, and she loved Scooby-Doo when she was little. And when I think of scary, I think of Scooby-Doo. So I themed our slides today Scooby-Doo to keep it interesting and not so boring. All right. Schema we're going to start with 4 principles of it, excuse me, to get you started and to kind of break it down for you. So there's schema.org, there's schema vocabulary, there's structured data, and there's formats. And we're just going to take it as those little buckets and start, going through those. So it'll be very easy to understand. And I'm going to take the scary schema and put it into real people language. So here's the scary verbiage of it. Schema is a collaborative community activity that is used for web pages and email messages and other things. And it promotes schemas for structured data on the internet. And we know Google uses structured data in deciding what is going to rank in search and providing that data in the search engine results page. So schema.org provides a collection of what is called shared vocabularies. So it's basically verbiage that the community has agreed to utilize and keep uniform. So it's just like any other language. It's a common talk and common code that is going to be used across like Google, Microsoft, Bing, Yandex, and Yahoo. So it is used across multiple websites, multiple search engines. It isn't just Google, even though a lot of times we think of Google. The interesting thing is that over 10 million sites are already using schema. So it's already really, really active and out there in the internet. Okay, so let's talk about vocabularies. So vocabularies are the heart of schema. Vocabularies are broken into entities and relationships between entities and actions. And that right there was a scary sentence, but that's the sentence that they actually use on schema.org. And what that really means is it talks about an entity like a hotel or a restaurant, and that entity's relationship between actions that may take place, like booking a reservation or obtaining a deal. And when we start to break it down, which we will, it doesn't seem so scary as those entities and those actions. Because when I first started looking at schema, I was like, whoa, this is overwhelming. And there's no really one plugin or one piece of code or theme that can just magically make all this appear for us, because that's not the way schema works. And really, in actuality, there's 597 types of schema vocabulary. And those lead to 867 properties and then 114 values. That's a lot of information, right? But really, it just boils down to data like numbers and times and things like that, and things like restaurants and bars and podcasts and events and books and music and comments and reviews. It's it's the things, and then how those things kind of go into those dates and those numbers, and then how you're going to interact with them with those activities. And that may seem like really still confusing, but we're going to have some examples. So structured data is the standardized format for providing that information or that schema on a web page. So Google uses that structured data to better understand the content of a page, right? So if I have a product, per se, on my store, my online store, and there's a review, that review is part of that schema. Structured data is the code that pushes that schema to the search engine so they can better understand the reviews. And it basically is just, we always say that SEO is all about helping the search engines better understand your content and find the right content to solve a user's problems. And schema and structured data at the heart of that. Schema just provides that language, and structured data is the means by which that language is deployed so Google can better understand your website and how your website can help solve problems for users. The other way to like to look at it is when you break it down, schema data helps Google see web content like a human does, right? So if we go to a website that's like a restaurant website and we're looking for things like reservations or times that it's open, we physically can see that on the page, and the human in us can digest that, right? We can see that the reservations are available, and we can make those reservations between maybe 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. at night. Well, that's a lot more difficult for Google to be able to understand that text on your website. But when you're using the schema structure and you've got that data available, it's very easy for Google to understand it because you're feeding it over to Google or other search engines in a common language that they can understand. And that common language is used to produce things like the knowledge graph elements and rich snippets that we've explored in prior webinars. That is part of all of that artificial information and languages that the search engines are utilizing to provide a better user experience. And when you just kind of start to break it down with that like that, it doesn't seem as scary to me. When I looked at the code and I see all those different code examples, it becomes very, very intimidating. When I read Google's help docs at the beginning, it seemed very intimidating. But when I start to look at it as in the point of this schema and structured data, and just understanding the fact that it is all about Google being able to see your page like a human and be able to read the data like a human does, then it starts to fall into place. So when you want to deploy schema onto your website, there's 3 different ways that you can do it. You can pick which one fits with you, and I've got the 3 listed here, and we'll look at some examples of the code for 3. And Google will go through some additional information on each one of these and go through them. Some use JavaScript and embedded widgets, some are HTML specifications, and then some are HTML5 extensions that you can utilize. And really, it's going to be the best for your website and how you really want to weave those into your web pages, and again, help the search engines understand the who and the what and the why of you. All right, so let's look at this from a practical standpoint, right? So we've got 3 different websites here. One is the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, which is a hotel. I know that because I've stayed there. Second one is the Peppermill, which is a restaurant and bar. I know that because I visited there. I'm a human. The third one is the Cirque du Soleil, which is an event. I've been to Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas. Again, the human me understands all the differences of those 3 websites. I know that I can stay physically at the MGM Grand, I can eat or drink at the Peppermill, and I can be entertained at Cirque du Soleil. But Google does not, right? To Google, they're all just 3 websites. And when it looks at just the websites as, regular everyday websites, the little bot over the left-hand side says, yeah, that's great, but I really don't understand the nuances of each one. And it can't see the depth of the content and the information and how they can apply to humans as a physical human like me could do. Well, now what happens if we have schema in place? it's a game changer. So for the search engines, now, whether it's Google or Bing or somebody else, they come in and they start to see the MGM Grand, but instead of just seeing the MGM Grand's website, they see this little guy right down at the bottom, this right here, and he says, oh, I see this is a hotel. And the next guy, he sees that it's a local business, which goes further down into the verbiage, and it says it's a food establishment, oh, and it's a bar or a pub. So it starts to drill down into those groups so Google can really understand what type of website it is and how it might really relate to a searcher. Now the next one, same type of principle. It's an event. And it's not just an event, it's a theater event. And the really cool thing is when Google's looking at these 3 different websites, when the schema's right, it just doesn't see it's a hotel room. It can see things like it's a hotel room, there's availability, and here's the price for a standard room. And oh, by the way, the MGM Grand has a special or a deal going right now, and here's the price of that. For the Peppermill and in the Fireside Lounge that's attached to it, which is really cool, by the way, it would not just say that it's a restaurant or bar. It would say, hey, it's a restaurant and it's a bar. Here's the hours of operations. Here's additional information on where it's located and how you can get to it and things like that. It could even start to have push data like menus. And it just, again, all helps the search engines understand more about that Peppermill and what it can offer to the search engines. Now think about you're going to Las Vegas and you want entertainment, right? And you go in to start to look for shows or venues and things like that. Google is again going to look at the schema for the Cirque du Soleil website to say, oh, I understand this is an event and they have shows on these dates and this is the type of event it is and here's the venue at which it's located at and here's the price for tickets. And all of this starts to fall into place for schema. Now, if we look at, let me go to my example. So if I am in the search engine results page, let me bring this up and center it for y'all. And I'm sure someone's going to ask me to zoom in on this, so I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so let's say that I did search for the Peppermill Lounge, and I get back these standard results on the left, and then I get back some information on the right. So there's actually, when we look at this, there's 2 different types of schema going on. So on the left-hand side, you have these ratings and these reviews that are coming in from these various websites. That's actually driven by schema, right? That's actually those reviews and that review part of schema that's pushing that data over. Now I see on the right-hand side, which Google's collecting this information. This right-hand side is actually the knowledge graph data for this establishment. Look at the information that's popping up for me. Where is it located? What is the address? When is it open? Where can I find the menu? Where's the phone if I want to make reservations? Then it starts pulling in activity from around the web so I can see some reviews. I even get to see some popular times of activity for this establishment. Oops, sorry about that. Heck, I even see some images in the back of related things. So there's a lot of information here. And Google's doing all of this and using schema to provide a good relationship with me, the searcher, and provide me answers to my questions and inquiries that I have. I mean, if you put it from the search engine's perspective, or excuse me, the user's perspective, if I come in here and someone said to me, which they did, we should go to the Fireside Lounge when you visit Vegas. And I pull it up and I'm like, beforehand, I'm like, I don't know. But if I pull it up and I see all of these 4-star ratings or 5-star ratings and I see the pictures and I look at the pictures and I'm like, oh, that looks like it's something out of the 1970s Charlie's Angels episodes, which it really does look like in real life. That might entice me to go. What does that do for me as a visitor? I am much more happy as a visitor. I have solved the question that I had as whether or not I really want to go to that, and I have information so I can plan my visit appropriately and know when I want to go. That is the heart of schema, and that's what Google really wants us to pay attention to. Now, if we look at another example, this is hotel deals, right? So this is like what we, the visitors, see. If I were to search for Vegas hotel deals, notice I've got dates associated with it. Now there's a listing. Again, I see that review schema, but I also see the deals that are coming up and the prices that are available. Heck, I can go to the map and I can start mapping this and seeing what hotels are available with deals around maybe the venues and the events I want to go to. All of this producing a very positive user experience, getting people to come back to the search engines, producing really good activity for both the visitor and these establishments, because they're getting their name out there and they're enticing people to come to their establishments. All of this is getting driven by schema, which is just, it's really, really cool and really powerful. All right, so let's look at the back end, right? I showed you what real people see. Now let's look to see how that translates from a code standpoint. So we looked at the basics of the website with the local business. It was a food establishment and it was a bar or pub. Now we look over to the middle. We take that core and we look at some of the schema data that's available, and this might be hard for people to see, but remember these are available, by the way, on SlideShare, so you can go grab them anytime and look at this bigger. But it talks about reservations. Does it have a menu? Does it serve cuisine? Does it have ratings? What kind of currencies are accepted? What are the operational hours? And all of this boring, data right here turns into this goodness for the search engine or for the user that I just showed you, creating that really positive experience. Now you might be saying, well, this seems like a whole lot of stuff and there's a lot of information, but you don't have to be that intimidated because there's a lot of good information on the schema.org website. Now the schema.org website, and I'll zoom in because it's got super, super small fonts. It may seem, again, pretty intimidating, but, when you go, it talks about the information I talked about. You can look at the hierarchies of the things that are available. And why am I telling you to do this? Well, I'm telling you to do this because there is no one plugin you're going to be able to find that's going to allow you to have all the schema at your fingertips. You actually have to kind of come and look and see what schema would apply to you. And when you first come in, it is scary, but it doesn't have to be. It just, when you start to scan it, you're like, okay, now I'm kind of starting to, get the feel of this. And let me just kind of go down to things that would be more common: movies, menus, reviews, software applications, TV series. How many of us go on the web when we're watching a TV series to see who an actor is or what episode it is? I know I do, and that's getting driven from schema information. There's events. So that we're talking about the Cirque du Soleil. Look at some of the breakdowns you have for events: children's events, comedies, businesses, food, music, theater. So there's lots of things that you can drill down. And if you click on one of these items, you're going to get even more detail. So the schema.org website, which again has a little fonts and it's hard to read, but once you start clicking around, you're going to see there's just a wonderful rich piece of information for you here to digest and really kind of look at what would apply to you. And I encourage you to do it. So if you're on this webinar and you're thinking, all right, so I do want to get schema. I see how schema is used in the search engine results. I know that can increase the click-through rates to my website or my blog, and I need to dive in. This is one of the first places I would recommend that you dive in, because you would be able to see all of the different types of schema are available in the data, and then really relate that back to you, because that's what you need to do. Schema is personalized. You need to see how this data relates to you and your website.
Rebecca, could you zoom in a little bit on that? It's
sure.
Really small.
Yeah, that is the one thing about this website that fully kills me. Can everybody see that now? Like sponsor, review. So those are just some examples. And I can back up. There's lots and lots of different types of information. I can't go through and list them all out on the webinar, and I was thinking about doing it at the beginning, but then I'm like, oh no, wait a minute, there's just way too many. There's no point in putting this in the slides because there is just so many different things, and Google's always adding to this. So like one of the more recent ones have been job postings or podcasts. So the list that you see currently isn't going to be the final list that Google offers. And the reason is because Google is getting more and more intelligent. Their algorithms and the way they present data is getting much more advanced. And as they continue to advance that, we're going to see additional options for schema rollout. I mean, look at that even down there, cable or satellite service. Who knew? I didn't even know that that was there. Okay. So I gave you some examples just, talking through, but I wanted in the slides for you to have some examples as well. So let's break down the hotel example. All right, so we've got a lodging business, which is it's a weird terminology. I mean, we don't use that in normal speak in the US. However, it is what is used within schema. So it's basically essentially a place or a location that houses units of an establishment, or in real person talk, hotel rooms. And these multiple hotel rooms can be within one building. Okay, that's the basics of that schema element. And the accommodations are the hotel room, that you want to rent. And then we can continue to drill down in the schema and provide additional information to say that we have a specific hotel room available for a specific amount of money, and it relates to occupancy. And then we can give information on how you can book that offer or that hotel room. And again, as you look through this lodging business, accommodation, offer, I mean, some of it's a little scary, but some of it's not. But you just have to kind of start to break it down into real people talk. It is, again, hotel rooms within a hotel, and they offer occupancy at a deal. Now, if you start to look at the schema, remember I said there was 3 different types of ways that you could present the data, and these are the 3 different types. And, based on your coding experience and what you're familiar with, or even how you're going to roll this out, that will dictate, which version you're going to go with. Okay, so here's further example of the microdata. And I had some of this showing on a prior slide, I think, but that one was for a restaurant. But you can just see, and I hope these are big enough for you, the street address, postal code, the locality or the city, the country. We've got a phone number. If for those of us that look at code, which by the way is not me, it's my team. This is this is normal. These are all things that you would see within your standard code. So again, not so scary when you start to just look it down and you break it down to exact examples of like the hotel. And down this other right hand side, we see some operating hours. I wanted to break them up so you could see information and it could be readable on the slides. Okay, so what about the relationship of this data? So they kind of intertwine. You've got the place, again, the accommodation, we have organization, it's lodging business, and you're breaking that down. It's a hotel. In real people talk, it is a hotel. It's schema for a hotel. And we have room with room categories, which we can offer a rate, which is the price, and then a specific unit price. Everything starts to connect, and you're looking at this. When I first started looking at the schema, it was code based to me, right? I wasn't thinking about relationships, and I started to dig into schema. You start to see the relationships, and this graph is a good way to view those relationships, because you can get a feel for this can be complex, but the search engines and the schema and the markup all goes together to create a binary way of bringing all of this relationship together so it can be presented on the search engine results page. Okay, so let's talk about implementing schema. So WordPress has lots of options. Again, I'm going to state you're not going to find one plugin to create all schema for you, or at least not at this point in time. You get schema in frameworks like Genesis. You're going to get schema in plugins like Yoast Local SEO or Yoast e-commerce SEO. When you get to the lower level page builders like Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, and HubSpot, they don't have a way to really utilize and present that schema data. So, and I've done a blog post on comparing those different packages from SEO and why they do have a lot of similarities. when you start to get to these advanced features, that is where they start to differentiate from one another. And then you see that, WordPress from an SEO standpoint definitely offers a little bit more than like Squarespace and a lot more than like Wix or Weebly. All right, so I mention the Yoast plugins because they are a very easy way to get schema out there. And the Yoast Local SEO plugin, I know a lot of people don't use it who have local businesses and work within a local environment. And I really think that's a disservice to you and your site. And I don't get any kickbacks from Yoast promoting his products. I promote them because I think that they're good for you and I think that they can do a lot of work for you. And I will admit, I didn't jump on the Yoast Local SEO plugin bandwagon at first because I was like, I don't really see the point of it. But then I noticed that it's got schema, and what it's doing all the schema work for you. Where, I may have showed you that list in the schema.org and it may have seemed really intimidating to you, but guess what? It doesn't need to be. You can just install like the Yoast plugin and you pick what you are. So like I installed it for a chiropractor, and guess what? There's selections for chiropractor, and there's areas to fill out the hours that the chiropractor is open and additional information. And the plugin makes it really easy to fill in that data, and then it takes that data and it creates all of the information for you to push that schema over to the search engines. And at $69 a year, I think it's a pretty good deal. Can you go create that data yourself? Absolutely. And if you are a coder and you're comfortable doing that, power on, go for it, save yourself the money and just create it yourself. If you're an end user on this podcast or this webinar and you're getting intimidated by the schema, you don't have to, especially if like local is your focus, because there's an easy plugin to install and just fill out. It doesn't take a lot of effort. So I want to show that right away because I want you to see that there's ways that you can produce schema and push it out through your website that are very easy to do and not intimidating at all. Now, the WooCommerce SEO plugin I've had on my sites for a really long time. The reason I've done it is because it pushes out those reviews and pricing out into the search engine results pages, which helps with click-through rates, and it helps the search engines understand what you're offering. Now, this one's $49 per year, not super expensive if you have an online store and you're making money from your website. Again, if you're a coder and you can do this on your own, power on. But if you're an end user and you have a WooCommerce store, I would definitely recommend that you get this plugin and you install it and you configure it, because it will help the search engines better understand your offering, and it will help them present you in the search engine results page, which will increase click-through rates to your site. When you see a list of products on the search engine results page and 3 have 5-star reviews, your eye automatically goes to that and you can't help but look at it and want to click through to it to investigate it further. So again, those are 2 just very easy ways to get schema onto your site. They will cost a little bit of money, but not too much for really the benefit that they're going to offer you. Okay, so here's a bunch of other plugins that produce schema for WordPress. So I gave you the first 2, and then there's some other ones that are available that I've listed all out for you. And now notice that like you've got easy recipe down here, recipe schema, big oven, and that's because a recipe schema is going to be completely different than schema for something else. There isn't, again, really one plugin that's going to do everything. There are some plugins that are starting to work towards that. So for example, Schema Depress is trying to be that one plugin, right? That's going to deliver all those things. And you can see that they've got a list of schemas over here. And this plugin is really trying to work towards that, right? To be that one-step plugin for all things schema. And they're making a valid effort with it. The downside of this is you have to know a little bit about it to be able to pick which schema type you want. Not bad. They gave you drop downs and things to help you configure it. So, if you're comfortable with digging in a little bit and reading documentation and maybe browsing through the schema.org website to see what type of information may be, available and maybe of interest to you, this plugin would be one that you should explore and see if you're comfortable using it. If you are, again, like a blogger and you're producing recipes, go straight for the recipe plugin because they're going to offer a lot more than just some basic schema. They'll give you the elements of the recipe and will really help the search engines understand that that's what, you're offering and that's what you're all about. Okay, some warning notices, right? There are, SEO's always got warnings, and I'm always going to throw out some caveats to the things that I try to get you to do and try to get you to deploy on your site. There are hundreds of types of schema vocabulary that you need to, be able to review and understand what they are. You are not going to find one WordPress plugin that's going to manage all of them. So, you just have to be able to dig in a little bit to figure it out. You need to know what type of schema you need before you start to search for a plugin or code base to implement that on your WordPress site. And again, that schema.org website's a great place to review that information. Examples of schema-specific plugins, again, local businesses, recipes, products for sales, reviews. Make sure you're picking the right plugin for what you want to offer on your site. And it may be that you may have a couple of plugins to be able to accommodate the different types of things that you offer. You're going to have to configure those plugins to make sure that the data is populated. Even if you do the Yoast Local SEO plugin, there are fields you have to populate, and that is so those fields are specific to you and your website. And just keep that in mind. That's really what you're trying to do, is be very specific on the information that you're presenting with schema and making sure that you're personalizing all of that data so the search engines get the best information on you and your website and what you offer. Okay, so misuse of schema can be deadly. If you go to Google and Google's Docs and you start looking up information on schema, they're going to give you some warnings because they really need you to provide the right markup. If you don't, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And they've got some cautions. So you don't want to have, for example, we'll use the recipes again. You don't want a blog category page that has 20 recipes on there, and then you apply schema to that. That's not how the schema works. The schema needs to be specific to an individual recipe. So the schema would reside on the individual post for that specific recipe. It should not be applied to the category. And so if you are going to manually take the markup of schema and the code and apply that to your theme and your website, keep those things in mind. You've got to make sure that you get it into the right place and it goes to the right types of data. You can have multiple types of structured data on a singular page. It just needs to be related correctly to what you're presenting. And Google gives the example of a recipe with a video, right? Both of them would have schema associated with them, but you just need to present that data. So it is perfectly okay to have both on the same post or the same page. Just make sure that schema is tied to the right object. And then, the third one is kind of funny. Your schema data should be a true representation of your page. Yes, I pulled that quote from Google, and yes, that kind of seems silly, but Google's nice way of saying, don't try to trick me, right? Don't try to have black hat practices that are going to trick me into thinking that you should have schema and applies to you when really it doesn't. And that goes with anything SEO is, you have to have the right information for the search engines to present you properly. The fourth one, again, goes with the rest of the SEO. It has to be properly filled out. You have to have minimum requirements for the search engines to be able to truly understand what you have and present that in results. Like I said, it goes with the rest of SEO. The more I's you dot and the T's you cross, the better your SEO process is, the better the search engines understand the who, the what, and the why of you. Okay, so once you get schema into your website, you need to go and review it in Google Search Console to make sure that there are no errors. And it's just right when you go into the Google Search Console for your website, underneath search appearance is structured data. Just click on that. Once the search engine crawls your content and sees what you have available, it will list all of the schema options right down for the data type. It's going to show you the source. It'll show you how many pieces of content will relate to that. And then if there's errors, it'll show you over here on the right-hand side, and you can get additional details on that. So if schema is new to your site, make sure that as soon as you get this and you refresh your XML sitemap and Google has time to crawl your site and and understand and index those changes. Make sure you're coming here and you're checking and you're reviewing those issues, and then you're actually going and addressing any that need to be addressed. And I'll admit, this is something that I forget to do on my own websites. We get caught up with the push out of the information and the data and being, that first to market and rushing with things. And then we forget to come in here and validate things are right. Google has gone to a large effort, and Bing as well now, to really give you information within Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster tools on what is right or wrong with your site. And I've preached this before, and I'm going to continue to preach it on every webinar, because as webmasters or bloggers, you have to take the time to come in here and really see what's working and what's not, and then address what's not. And don't follow my lead and forget that it's there because you're busy. Really take the time to do that. And if you don't have the time, hire someone to do that for you so they can dig in and make sure everything's good and working properly. You can do, by the way, I have it down here, which I'm glad I just caught my eye. There are some testing tools that you can do with a live site to get immediate feedback. So I have links on for those, and we'll want to make sure that you do those as well. This is under my extra credit resources. So for general information, I'm giving you those links of things that I looked at and I showed you before, like that schema.org. There's the documents, and then there's information on what that schema is, what schema is available. Google's got some great information on the second link. Bing has its own help information and information for you on marking up the website. Torque Magazine has a nice article from 2016, the end of 2016, that just was a really good overview about it, where you can learn additional information and digest it when time allows. There's some generators, so you can get generators from Google. Under the Webmaster sections, there's another website here listed. And then again, we want to test. We want to make sure that things are right. So there's some testing tools that you can go through those last 3 links. Those are in addition to the information you'll get specific to your website in Google Search Console. If you're like me and you actually deploy something, like I said, I forget to come back and look at Google Search Console. If that's the case, and you are me, before you head off on your merry way, come in here and test stuff. Test it out just to make sure that really the information that you're presenting will make sense to the search engines, and they can highlight you in the best possible manner for search. All right, so that is the basics of schema. I'm sure we're going to have questions, which is great. I wanted today to go through the highlights of it and make sure that you understand where you can get data, where you can get testing, the kinds of schema that are available, and as well as kind of just an overview of what schema is and why it applies to your website and why it should matter. When you try to cram in like a ton of code options within a webinar like this, it gets really overwhelming, and I didn't want it to be overwhelming to you. So that's it. So Nathan, I'm going to bring you back so we can go through any Q&A and hit those. Or look at any other examples. I'm happy to bring up examples live on the web for things so we can kind of see how schema might be presented.
Perfect. We have no questions at all.
Really? Well,
no,
people
I'm
are
kidding.
asleep.
We have
Scooby-Doo.
We have a ton of questions, like lots of questions.
Okay.
So if you guys still have a question that you've been holding, please drop that in the chat room at ithemes.com/chat. Preface that with the word question in all uppercase so that I can pull that out. Yeah, I tell you what, let's go ahead and share the slide link. We had lots of people asking that as we were going today, so I'm going to drop that in the chat room now. You'll see Rebecca's slide share link is there as well. Okay, let's dive in here, and this is we'll start. This is a softball, okay? Michelle wants to know, and I think this is a really great question. Would you explain your definition of SEO? Because a lot of people view that differently.
So my definition of SEO, and the lead I always start with training and presentations and things, is when you're doing SEO, your job is to help the search engines answer problems and solutions. And by doing so, you're helping them find the right answer from your website or blog. Right? You're providing a roadmap for the search engines, and all the things we do with SEO, whether it be, keyword research or on-page optimization or technical SEO or worrying about accessibility or things like schema, is we're trying to help the search engines find that answer, because their job is, as Google and Bing's job is to help people find information on the web. And the web is basically broken down into content and links. And our job of SEO is to bring those together so that the search engines clearly know what piece of our content can answer a user's question. And that question could be anything, but we all use it, right? We all use Google, young to old, and that's the heart of SEO. Now, there's lots of things you can do with an SEO to help make that happen, but that is the heart of SEO. And if anybody tries to veer you off of that into some get-rich schemes and some SEO super easy, which it's not, right? It takes work, but it's all obtainable. And, and if people start to give you 5 great tips to SEO to rock your website, that's not that really true, because it can't help Google find those answers, right? You have to do some work and some research and some execution to make sure that Google knows exactly what's located on your website or blog and how that can help searchers.
Great answer. Okay, let's... we have a lot of questions. So I'm glad you stopped early, because I think we're going to fill up the rest of our time with Q&A.
Okay, good.
So before we dive into that, though, you may have noticed over in the sidebar of the chat room that we have a couple of different training workshop options that Rebecca is going to bring to us, one in December and one in January. These are specifically for those of you who are working with clients. And this is your opportunity to learn directly from Rebecca, who's been doing search engine optimization work for clients for many years. And she's basically going to open up her toolkit and share the information with you on how you can make money doing SEO. So Rebecca, talk just for a minute before we get into the questions about these 2 workshops and what people can expect.
Sure. So the website audit workshop, which is the first one in December, I use that for lead generation. I use it as a paid service, and then I also use it as a route for additional services if the client wants it. And a lot of times when someone has me do an audit, they're like, I'm going to tackle, items 1 through 20, but whoa, items 20 through 40 are well outside my expertise. I need you to take those over for me and your team. And we're happy to do that for them. And that's really what we're going through with those audits is you get my audit template. We're going to go through kind of tools and how to get that information for the audit template, and then how you can utilize it within your freelance, your agency business practice. And again, these workshops are for agencies, developers, and freelancers. They're not for end users. We have some end user workshops coming at the beginning of the year. And then the second one is selling and managing SEO projects. I'm going to take you through deciding what type of SEO services are good for you, specifically you, not everybody, because everybody's got different skill sets. We're going to talk about positioning yourself for those services. We're going to talk about lead generation. We're going to have a lead scorecard that I offer. We're going to look at proposals and what needs to be included in your proposals and things not to say in your proposals. Then I give you my project plan for execution. I also give you project budgets and breakouts so you can take that and plop it into your own proposals. And just kind of walk through at the very end some communication templates you're going to want to have, and then some answers for things that kind of pop up. So really, what I've learned over 15 years of SEO and 10 years of doing selling of SEO services and managing those products for clients.
All right, so take advantage of that. Have a look at the informational pages on each of those workshops and get more information there. If you are an iThemes Toolkit member, you do get access to those workshops at no additional cost. So, okay, let's dive into some questions here. Rebecca, Tom wants to know, he says he set up Yandex Webmaster Tools because Yoast recommended it, but he doesn't know anybody that uses this search engine. Why is it important to set up a Yandex Webmaster Tools account?
I believe that search engine is overseas. I think it's maybe like in the Russian area, if I recall correctly, and it's going to only be applicable if you are in that area. I think I have one for some of my websites, and it does bring in traffic, but again, it's Russian traffic, right? So if you're selling services locally, you don't really care about Yandex. Or locally, I'm sorry, within an area outside of Russia. I'm assuming people are near me in Michigan, which is completely false.
Noreen, that is correct. If you are an iThemes Toolkit member, you get free access to all of the paid events on iThemes Training. Okay, next question. Marge is asking, can adding schema.org to your website help with domain authority?
Anything that you're going to do with SEO can help with domain authority, and that's because the search engines will better understand and trust your website. So keep that in mind. Like anything that you're doing with white hat SEO that is in the the realm of helping create a positive user experience and helping the search engines understand your site and your content, that all helps with domain authority.
All right. Paul is asking, he says, if he adds schema, will this get his Google listing to have the subheadings that are listed under my listing like some businesses has? So for example, on some sites, when you see them in the SERPs, they have like the sub pages underneath the main listing. And that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, I do not believe any of that is driven by schema. I believe that's driven by the search engines having a good understanding of your site and feeling like your site is trustworthy, right? And then they decide what is getting shown there. I can tell you from my site in the past, it's been very active pages, so where people are commonly going, and that's what Google's using to highlight those.
Great. So Paula asks, do you need to apply schema to terms in the body of a purely informational page on a website, like explanation of legal or business concept, that sort of thing?
So if you're using frameworks like Genesis, which is one of the reasons why I like it, it differentiates the different sections of your website already with that type of data. So the search engines understand like a header versus a footer, the body of the content versus the sidebar. So that, that's already done for you. Do you need to have additional information for just basic content? No. If it's just basic, like a paragraph and things like that, no, you don't need special schema for that. Schema is really designed for the search engines to understand specific things like courses and podcasts and reviews, and then utilize that information to push it into and highlight on the search engine results page. And like a basic page about terms and conditions, that wouldn't apply.
Okay. Noreen wants to know, in that gigantic list of schema information that we saw, is there a schema category for WordPress developer?
I honestly don't know, because there's over 500. Now there might be for developer, but I can't answer that specifically for a WordPress developer.
All right. Jay wants to know, does Google prioritize the Google My Business information over on-site structured data? And if there's conflicting details, which does Google trust is more accurate?
Right. Repeat that one more time.
Okay. So the question is, does Google prioritize the Google My Business information for a company over the company's on-site structured data? And if there's a conflict, which one does Google trust is more accurate?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, we know when Google's presenting data in the Google Maps, it's coming above organic results. So you absolutely want to make sure that information is accurate. Does it go off of that more than your page itself, your website itself? I don't know. But what I do know is that information is part of Google and it's in Google's data set. So I would think that they would, my guess is they would defer first to that and then look at external sources. But you always, if you're local, you always have to make sure that they line up, right? But keep in mind, there isn't, the Google Maps has limited categories. The category may not completely line up, and they might not be exactly the same as the schema. So you want your website schema to be exactly what you do if it offers that, like through the Yoast plugin. And then you want to get as close as you can on the Google Maps category, because the category is super important. If you're in a situation like me, who does both website design and development as well as SEO, we got a kind of a conflict there because I can't pick both of those categories. So I have to pick which one I want to go after within the maps. But, you want to have a category because you want to be able to make sure that you are displayed. And we know the category and Google My Business definitely influences where you show up in that search results.
Fantastic. This is a great question from Teresa. So what if you're a home business? If you're a local home business, will Yoast Local SEO plugin still be worthwhile to use, or is it better for brick and mortar type businesses? And maybe just a broader question, what about those who work from home? How do they rank for local with using Schema or not?
That's a great question, and we've had that recently in the Facebook group, the SEO Launchpad group, because there was an article that we shared, or I shared about it, that went into that specifically, and it talked about, if you're a home business and you really don't want to display your address on Google, how do you best manage that? So I would encourage you to, if you're in that situation, to go to the group and find that article, because I don't remember off the link off the top of my head. So you can use Yoast if you have a home business and you don't mind having your home business show, your address. But that's the caveat, right? And a lot of people are in that boat where they've got a home-based business and they don't really want their address to show, but they want to be able to show up on local. Google's idea with local is they want to be able to send traffic to you. And by traffic, I mean both search traffic and physical traffic to you. So you got to find a good balance there. I mean, there's no one answer for everybody. There's going to be, gray areas of that. And again, I would encourage you to go into the SEO Launchpad group, because there was a really good article that talked about that exact situation. If you're a brick and mortar, by the way, you definitely want the Yoast Local SEO plugin, because you're specifically who it is designed for.
Absolutely. And I just dropped the link for Rebecca's Facebook page there in the chat room at ithemes.com/chat. That's a free group. Join up. And it's a very active group with lots of good information. If one of you kind souls wants to scan that group and drop that article about local SEO in the chat room, I'm sure that would be helpful to people as well.
Sarah Dunn's on the webinar. She can do it. Sarah, I'm giving you a task.
All right. So Tom is asking, will the Schema plugin URLs be provided after the webinar? Oh, you know what? I answered that question already. Tom, that long list of Schema plugin URLs is in the SlideShare link. Let me drop that in the chat room again. There it is. There are Rebecca's slides, and you can grab the URLs out of there.
Yeah, the interesting thing, by the way, about those plugins and things, for WordPress, there's not a lot of Schema plugins yet. I'm really surprised by that. It's like the community is afraid of Schema, and we don't need to be afraid of Schema. We just need to kind of dive in. And I mean, if you're a developer on here and you're getting into Schema, I'd love to see more plugins you develop for specific things like, like podcasts or, whatever, because I think the community is rich for it and they really want it.
Got it. So Jay is asking, is it worth ensuring any AMP pages also contain structured data?
So, I can't answer the question of how Google combines AMP and structured data. I know AMP takes out visual things, right? Because the goal is to make the AMP pages really fast and great for like third world countries and people with low broadband. I don't know off the top of my head if Schema is associated with those AMP pages, or if Schema resides on the main pages and Google uses that Schema in deciding what to display, with AMP. I unfortunately, I don't have enough, but that would be a good blog post for me to look into and write.
Awesome. Lewis asks, how long does it take for Google to show changes to the Schema on your site?
That's going to vary by your site, and it's kind of like the same idea. If you deploy a brand new site, how long does it take Google to index it? The more active your site is, the more you make changes, the more Google is inclined to come back and crawl the site and digest those changes and get them into the index. So it is going to vary heavily by the activity of your site and how often, you're pushing out fresh and new content.
And you can also go to Google Search Console and request Google to crawl the site, right?
You can, and you can resubmit the sitemap to help encourage them to get there as well.
All right, so Fred is asking, how or where is Schema for services implemented on your website, Rebecca? He's looking for a good example to look at.
I haven't done it. I'm like the cobbler's
so
kid.
You're like the rest of us whose websites need We have a total to-do list on our own websites, right?
I am, and it's when we have multiple websites too, and it's just something that we haven't gotten to. And you know, it needs to be done. It's on my list. I have AMP on my list as well. I've tested AMP on one of our sites. I need to roll it out to the other ones as well. It's just, you know, I think it's the nature of everything we do. We spend more time with our clients and like on webinars on like this than actually deploying it out in our own sites. I do have some schema on the sites. Like my DIY site would have schema for products with reviews and things like that. You know, so I have been using, like I said, the WooCommerce product schema for a very long time, that plugin, because I think that's a great plugin. And I've been deploying the local SEO plugin from Yoast on a lot of client sites because I know it just produces a lot of good value for them.
Very good. Okay, Anne is asking, where do reviews come from that show up on the knowledge graph?
So that's going to depend on the type of content it is, right? So there's reviews for articles, there's reviews for like testimonials, there's reviews for products. So it's going to come from a variety of sources based on the type of actual content it is. And then there's reviews, by the way, in the knowledge graph on the side that comes from social media sites like Facebook or Google Plus, where people can leave reviews, or Google Local. So, I mean, and Yelp and things like that. There's a lot of different sources that of data that Google's collecting now to kind of push out those reviews in the SERPs.
Gotcha. And a couple of follow-up questions on reviews. One from Sarah. She asks, do you have any thoughts on adding review schema to your own website, as in a review for you from one of your customers to get stars to show up in the SERP? Is that okay?
It is okay. You know, so, and here's the caveat to that, because there's plugins that will do that for you, and you know, and services. You want to make sure that the review is specific to the review itself and not like overriding on the website, because that is, I have seen that before where people have done that and it's been not executed properly.
Can you repeat? So don't do what?
So you want the reviews to be specific to the review itself and not like overriding. So I've seen people put review schema globally as opposed to an individual review.
Gotcha.
Kind of like the recipes, putting recipe schema on the category page for the recipes as opposed to the individual post. It confuses the search engines and it works against you.
That makes sense. So, Anne, that kind of answers your question about how to specify reviews so Knowledge Graph picks them up. You wrap those individual reviews with the review schema. It's really good information. I did not know that. Okay, Marianne is asking, she says she saw a Yext video yesterday that shows adding schema directly onto a website by putting a link from Yext into the header of the website. Is that legit?
I've never heard of that. However, Yext is legit, so I would assume it is. They're a very large company. They specialize in that. So they must have, you know, a way to deploy that code in an efficient manner. And it's great that you brought this up because, you know, I know that's a paid for service and it can be expensive, but that would be a great way to kind of deploy schema and not have to get into the nitty gritty of it.
Sure would. Maybe they're using some sort of tool like Google, for heaven's sake. The Google Code Manager, what's it called? That can inject the code in the top of your site, the header and footer. Yeah. Anyhow, what am I trying to say? Google. Somebody out there knows what I'm talking about.
I always do the same thing. You know,
Tag Manager. Thank you, Jay. Tag Manager.
You forget stuff.
Yeah. Gosh. All right. So a few more questions, and I'm going to have a drink. Stacy is asking. A client has many pages and each page has many videos. Do you set up schema for every video?
I would assume the schema would be specific to the video and not again to the page, because it's going to confuse the search engines if you do it to the page. I would love to hear people's plugins that they may be using for that. So if anyone in the chat room is using a plugin for video schema, I know Yoast has a video plugin and that might produce schema. I've never used it myself, but I'd love to hear people's thoughts.
Interesting. Okay, so Martin's question. He says he publishes an academic journal with articles on his website. These articles are recognized as authored by him on Google Scholar. What schema should he use? Article, author, both, something else?
Ooh. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Like I said, there's 500 different elements. We would have to go and look at schema.org to see what each one says. So I do not have a quick answer for that.
Hey, Martin, you should join Rebecca's Facebook group and drop that question in there, and let's have a discussion about it.
Yeah, here's what I love about the Facebook group is I'm not the only one answering questions in there. There's a lot of good, knowledgeable SEO people that provide answers. And last week I was in Mexico and I didn't have internet. And there was lots of great discussion while I was gone. People were, posting comments, and other people were coming in and answering and helping out the whole time I was gone. And that just really warms my heart because I love everybody helping each other.
Absolutely. Okay, so Tony asks, if you have a site that posts new car reviews, one per page, can the reviewer's rating of that car be included in schema to show up in the SERPs?
I would think yes, but I'm not sure how it would be applied. I mean, is it like a car you're selling, or is it just
reviews of new cars?
New cars. So I would think that would be kind of like a product review, and yes, that review should show if it's deployed correctly.
Very cool. Two last questions, and we'll cut you loose here, Rebecca. Melanie wants to know, and this is a great question. When a business has multiple location and each location has a page on the website, can you cover how schema handles those kinds of multiple locations?
You would want schema for each page on the website and to be unique to that page.
Gotcha.
So yes, that definitely applies. That would be great usage of schema, and you would want it per page.
And so, for example, the location specific page probably has an address and a phone number. All that stuff should be wrapped in the local business tag and the address and phone, all that's specific to that local business entity, correct?
Yes. As opposed to site-wide. So if we have a single office chiropractor website, he's got one office, he's got one set of hours, we could have that in the footer of the website and show up for the whole thing. But if he's got multiple locations, we'd need to present that differently so we don't provide confusion.
Gotcha. So if there was maybe a home office address for a business with multiple locations and that home office address is in the footer, you probably not want to have schema around that then, right? If you're going to have pages for the local offices.
Yeah, because if your footer shows up on the pages for the local offices, it's going to be confusing and conflicting.
Exactly. Melanie's saying that in that case that they each have different addresses but one main phone number. So I guess you keep the phone number the same on the local listings, correct?
I don't know. I'd have to research that. I know when you have one phone number across multiple addresses, it can be confusing, right? Especially when you get to those local profiles and you go to validate those, they can look like duplicate listings because it's hard for the search engines to understand that you didn't move and that you've got multiple locations sharing one number.
Yeah. Hey, Melanie, that sounds like another good discussion for the Facebook group. So join that group and drop it in there. One last question here. I know there are others, but we've reached our time period here. If you have additional questions that did not get answered, make sure you join Rebecca's Facebook group. I've just dropped the link in the chat room again, and we will wrap up with this question from Frank. What SEO or schema advice would you give for a large local event like a show or market where attendees would need to be reached from all over the country?
You would still want the schema, right? Because the schema will help the search engines understand what's going on. And we'd need to research to see how to best present it based on your specific criteria and what data do you fill out and what data do you not fill out or, maybe change. But I still think it would be valid because it is an event.
Yeah, exactly. And schema is microdata, and we can get micro technical with all of these schema questions as a result of that. Really, really good questions and use cases that we fleshed out a bit. Rebecca, thanks for taking all this on and answering all these questions kind of on the spur of the moment here with so many different use cases.
My pleasure.
And again, the best place to follow up on this, folks, and especially this one, I do hope that you'll join Rebecca's Facebook group. The link is there in the chat room. If you've enjoyed this training, we do have lots of other training available on iThemes Training at no additional cost. Lots of free webinars going on all the time. I've just dropped the link in the chat room for our ongoing free webinar schedule. And of course, we do have those workshops there in the sidebar. If you are a person working with clients and you want to offer SEO services, make sure you look at these 2 upcoming workshops. If you're not an iThemes Toolkit member, there's a small investment, but you should be able to make back the investment on both of those workshops, probably with your first client, easily, I would think. So Rebecca, any last words before we sign off today?
Next month, we are going to be reviewing linking, which is super important, and it is the most undervalued SEO tactic available. So I would encourage everybody to join us for that one because I think it's going to be a good one.
Yes, getting your links together. So, folks, thanks for hanging out with us for the last hour or so. We're glad you were with us. Hopefully you've picked up a lot of information about schema, and you can continue the discussion there in Rebecca's Facebook group, and we hope to see you on the next event in just about a couple of weeks now. Rebecca, you'll be back with that linking webinar. So thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time here on iThemes Training.